Okay, beautiful people. Good afternoon. It's another episode coming to you live and direct on YouTube Live. This is Day and Night Podcast with your host Matthew with another episode 61. We got more great content for you. As always, like, subscribe, comment, share if you can, and check us out on Spotify. And also on Wednesdays, it will be posted again on YouTube for those that weren't able to catch it live. So, like I said, we got another one for you today. And this one, touches home for me because one, I'm a, black male in the United States. And that's what this guest is going to talk about is the basically the Black American experience. So the guest, his name is Orlando Taylor, and he was born in St. Louis, Missouri. He spent 11 years volunteering with St. Paul Saturday's Manhood and Leadership Development Program, helping African American males navigate life to go on to college. He currently lives in Mercedes, California. He continues to write and work on intellectual properties for film, TV, and comic books. So he's currently an author, and he writes in the hopes of informing the readers about the Black experience and that there is life beyond the trauma, much like James Baldwin or Richard Wright. He examines how these experiences collide. He has also been featured in several anthologies of poetry. So he should be on in about next 5 to 6 minutes. And again, he's on the West Coast. So I think there was a little bit of misunderstanding as far as the time. So I believe he was trying to chime in a little bit earlier. So hopefully that didn't discourage him, and he's still able to come on at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So two of the topics that we're going to talk about is based off of his writings, and the first one is Black males. It's important for them to graduate. So we're going to get into that a little bit. And then the other topic is why do Black men need healing? So that's the one I'm going to really, really be interested in. And, that's the one that I'm probably going to comment more about and talk about because, like, one of the other episodes we had, and we were talking about healing. Um, Not that Black men needs more healing. Okay. So that should be him coming on right now. And Mr. Taylor, I don't know if you can hear me. Are you there? There you go. Are you there? Can you hear me?
Recording your progress.
Orlando, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Give me one moment, make sure I got mine together.
Okay. Hey, I apologize. I saw that you was trying to chime in at 2.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Give me 1 second. I'm still having a little bit of an issue here
Okay.
in getting the Zoom application to accept the correct speakers and microphone.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
All right, good, good.
All
Let's see
right.
if I
So
can
I
turn
just
up the
want to
volume.
thank you for taking your time out on this busy weekend. I'm sure you had many other things to do. So I want to,
Oh, for sure.
personally
I
thank you.
appreciate you even inviting me to your
Oh, by all
platform.
means. When I saw your bio, I said I have to get this brother on. You have
Good,
important
good.
stuff to get out, and I wasn't able to read everything that you have, but I was able to
Okay.
just skim through some of it. But I'm
Mhm.
definitely interested in hearing what it is that you have to say to the audience. So I just thank you for coming to the Day and Night podcast. And
Appreciate you having me again.
with no further ado, the floor is yours. Tell us who you are, how you started, and the main focus, like I put in the email, is why should Black males graduate? If I'm saying that right. And then the other topic is why do Black men need healing?
Okay, so thank you again. Appreciate you having me on your platform. My name is Orlando Taylor. I'm a writer and a poet. I'm also an educator. I teach at Merced College here in Merced, California. And I started writing. I've been writing since I was a child. I started writing when I was like 8 years old, just kind of encouraged from my grandmother, who was an early educator during the, I guess, era of World War II. She was one of those educators, one of those teachers who taught in a one-room school. And so my mom and all of her brothers, 11 brothers and sisters, they did so well in school because my grandmother taught them a lot of the basics of reading and writing and some of the basics in mathematics before they even started regular, proper public school. And so that kind of have stuck with me. Just reading has always been very important in my family. I can remember growing up as a kid is reading during the era of reading is fundamental. You probably remember that, and bookmobiles and
Mm-hmm.
competitions in the summertime, for to get books so that you could get tickets to the ice capades, football games, baseball games, all kinds of things were centered around in the Black community and under public education towards reading. And I think that's one of the reasons why I became a writer, because I was reading so much and became an average reader, so much so that one time I almost got locked inside of a library because I was reading this book and I didn't want to put it back on the shelf because it was a reference book. And so that's kind of like the beginnings of where this love of writing, this love of words, this love of reading has come from. Um, and so I wrote a book. The first book of poetry that I wrote is called "My Scars," or "My Birthmark," which is kind of looking at the trauma I experienced growing up in the intersection between blackness, being a male, black male, as well as being a gay black male, and looking at those intersections within the family, within the community, and with the community, a black community in particular, with the larger community of the United States. So working through and looking at all the trauma that you get in those poems. And then my second book of poetry is called uh, Black Music, Politics, and Word Bombs. And in that book, I'm looking at more specifically some of the real issues that are affecting us and just kind of, and I paired it with the music that influenced. So in that book, you can scan a QR code and get a link to a song that helped inspire the words to the poems in my second book of poetry. In the essay that you're talking about, in that essay, and both books, by the way, can be found on Barnes and Noble or Amazon.com. In the one essay you were talking about why Black men need healing, and I think it's something that has come to fruition. That was written a few years ago, the op-ed piece, just basically looking at the various traumas directly linked to being Black and being male in this country, and looking how over the past, I would say, decade and a half, how Black women have really positioned themselves in a very powerful and productive way, progressive way within the Black community, just really kind of getting on, so to speak, getting on their bicycle and riding out through these various issues, whether it's issues for Black women that are directly related to their intersection and connection to the Black community, or whether it's issues that Black women have had to address for themselves with the relationship with the greater, community of the United States. And so it really has been a lot going on. And I think that as I was looking at the development and the healing that was going on for Black women, I feel that, and I think I'm not the only one in this sphere, that Black men also need a similar type of healing. As we see, there's been a number of, there's a number of podcasts that are out here that are encouraging Black men to get therapy, encouraging Black men to throw away some of the old traditional tropes that literally have been killing us, and yet they're killing us, and they're also detrimental to the overall Black community as a whole. And so that was one of the reasons where that particular article came out, just looking at that we need to heal and throw away some of those tropes, throw away some of these pressures that we put on ourselves to live up. In many cases, where we finding out these images of maleness, these images of masculinity and how they play out, have nothing to do with the Black community. These are images that were given to us by white supremacy. And so when you look at characters that were created by, say, people like Clint Eastwood or people like John Wayne, unfortunately, the greater manosphere has tried to adhere to those things, but we find that those things aren't really for us, and they end up leading to a certain level of toxicity that has caused a lot of problems in our community. And I think that was ratcheted up during the late 80s and the 90s, during the Reagan administration afterwards, when you had this intersection between the draconian drug laws that were created, the prison industrial complex, along with gang culture and some of that how it affected, education. So they began to dumb down a lot of access, or should I say, they began to remove a lot of access to in public education and to for Black community to go to education beyond, the K through 12 environment. And so I feel like the Black man has been invited and unfortunately has accepted a lot of these imageries. A lot of this imagery, to me, and a lot of the ideas of manhood center around thug culture, drug culture, and the images. And I see this pervasiveness even within, sometimes I feel like, the television shows and the movies that have come in the last 10 years come out for the Black community. On Tubi, you can't, it's like an ungodly plethora of these types of hood films. And I'm sure you've probably seen some of, and people have gotten to the point they're making memes about the films of how bad they are, the content in those films. And so I just felt like when I wrote that op-ed, I really felt that we need to step back from those things, look at ourselves. What are the real things that we need to do as Black men in a community to help bring us forward? And one of those things I even posited in the essay is that sometimes, like during the 90s, there was this big thing about, gods and earth, where the women were the earth and the men were the gods. And I always found that strange, particularly from, studying as and more people talking about this now, how the Black woman, is basically amongst all humanity, it's like the God amongst humanity, because she has the mitochondrial DNA that can produce any race. And so it was always interesting to me that the Black woman was called the earth and the Black man is God. When people say, well, he can, but it takes a woman to do that. It takes the Black woman specifically to be able to do that. And so it doesn't matter if he has it all, but if he doesn't have the Black woman to help him complete that, then it's a non-issue. So I just felt like we need to let go of, in my head and how I see it, that we need to let go of that kind of ideology, because it will relieve and remove a lot of pressure from us. Because I feel like culturally and historically, the Black community has always been better when Black men and Black women are locked in step together. I don't think we would have had the plethora of Black Wall Streets historically in this country, that many were destroyed, without Black women having an integral and intimate part in creating the atmosphere and the infrastructures that Black people were able to create, despite, the racism in this country. And I feel like one of the pieces in that healing I was getting to is that we need to let go of the idea that comes from religion, even pseudo religion, that the man was first. Maybe it was the woman that was first, and maybe you came from her from some miraculous way. Maybe God or some energy created you as a need for her. And I was pausing and trying to say, would that be a bad thing? Is that a bad thing? Do women look at it? Most women would, and particularly in Christianity, deep in Christianity, they don't look at it as a bad thing that a woman comes from a man's rib. So if the truth was in the reverse, that a man came from a woman's rib in some way, I think a lot of men have a problem with that. And I think when you let go of those tropes, you let go of that intensity and that idea that I have to be first. And if I can't be first in this equation of of humanity, then I'm nothing. And then when you start doing that, you start realizing how much it really takes for people to work together in order for you to be that way. You really come to understanding. An example I often give for that is in single parent homes run by women. I grew up in a single parent home run by women. We had fathers who were connected to us, but at the same time, it was a single parent home with my mom. And one of the things I said, in those types of homes, some of the most prolific men and women come from single parent homes run by women. And a lot of find when I have discussions with them, and they said the reason why they feel like is because they had no role. Everybody in the home, particularly in those types of homes, everyone does every job. So even today, my mom, before she passed away back in 2013, she would always say the men in our family cook better than the women. But she taught all the men in our family. She taught us how to cook. She taught us how to clean. She taught us how to sew. Because she would always say, before you leave, when you leave this house, you might not be stepping into somebody else's home. So you need to be able to take care of yourself. And that means being able to do all kinds of things, and that means being able to do some of the things that men say are just for women and women say are just for men. So my sister knows how to change a tire and how to change the brakes, but I also know how to sew a hem in a pair of pants. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
That makes perfect sense. I'm just listening to you talking. That word trauma is like very, very broad and it's deep.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that you said that stood out to me is, as far as the ideology, I believe that we're following another man's ideology, and that's probably
Mm-hmm.
where, in my opinion, the biggest disconnect is. And I believe
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the trauma is because we're trying to live as someone else, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
have that same type of makeup, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. You don't even have the same
So
type of access a lot of times to
exactly.
actually to live according to that definition that was given to you.
Mhm. So it's one thing that I was thinking about when I read the essay, and
Mm-hmm.
as far as the trauma, and I'm just curious what your perspective is. And I know that we all go through a certain trauma based off of, someone else, as far as the disadvantages that they place in front of us. But I personally feel as though we kind of put ourselves in a situation to where we cause more trauma against ourselves that we don't have to. And I'm just going to use this for an example. I don't know if you pay attention to social media, some of the podcasts. There's one particular one which everyone has been talking about for the last 2 weeks, is the one with Shannon Sharp and um, Cat Williams.
Oh, Williams Club
And
Shay Shay, yeah, that
yeah,
situation,
Club
yeah.
Shay Shay. So
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
me, I just noticed that a lot of times we're going against each other. And it's not so much the other person, it's more so us. And
Mm-hmm.
how I equate that to trauma, because trauma is anything. And if we have a young male, black male that's growing up, and if he's being shown, disadvantages or being treated a certain way by someone else, and then he's experiencing that in his same culture, that's, to me, that's more added trauma. So if we respected each other more and didn't give fuel, so to speak, for people to continue to attack us and so forth, I think that's something we need to heal from as well. Is this not always going at each other and hating on each other for things that don't make sense? Like Cat
Yeah,
Williams. Go ahead.
go ahead. I'm saying, no, no, I agree with you. I believe that there's a, the other side of that for me personally, and what I look at it, for me, this situation that came up with these, because the broader picture is celebrityism. That's for me the very broader picture is celebrityism, and our, as Paul Mooney said, sometimes black folks are too interested in white folks' things. And what he meant about that is some of the social political things that they're involved in that really don't really align with our community. And so when I look at the situation with Cat Williams and his issues with other individual comedians, to me, it brings up the bigger issue because it's the parallel and the connecting issue also is the situation, unfortunately, that happened with Monique 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And so what I'm finding, and this is a 21st century example of what Frantz Fanon talks about in his book called The Wretched of the Earth. In that book, Frantz Fanon discusses how the issues around the fall of colonialism on the continent and the rise of independence amongst those countries that were being developed at the end of colonialism in the 1960s. And one of the biggest problems he said was is the bourgeoisie. And I believe, and from my perspective, what this has shown is that what Malcolm X used to talk about, we have to be careful of the celebrityism that we constantly find ourselves propping up as an image of something that we're supposed to attain, and it really
Exactly.
isn't. And so what you're finding is that Cat Williams is exposing, in the same way that Malcolm X is exposing a lot of the celebrityism and a lot of the gatekeeping that has happened in the black community as it intersects with the film industry, it intersects with the music industry, and intersects with politics. And so you have, but it's all intersecting through some darkness that happens because of white supremacy and its oppression. So for me, it is this beautiful, not beautiful, but it's this intersection between desperation and desire and economics that is basically bubbling up and allowing the public to see that a lot of these people who are talking about you know, like even when you look at the situation with certain actors who were saying that they too went through things, none of those actors, if you remember, very few of those actors co-signed what Monique was saying, right?
Hmm.
Co-signed the issue she was talking about, the gatekeeping that was happening, feeling like she was being pressured to do things that she couldn't afford to do, let alone she didn't want to do, as well as being pressured for things that were not even in her contract to do. But if you, as Steve Harvey told her, you and I think it was Whoopi Goldberg, you should have played the game. You should have called me.
Hmm.
I would have told you how to play the game. And I think this is a thing where we have to get to that point where we're calling out these types of things that are detrimental to our community, and then setting them and they're setting them aside and saying, this is what it looks like to be anti-black and to be black. And I think
Hmm.
that for me personally, that's where I see that interview and the intersections happening in the conversations. Yeah, it's hilarious, and some of the stuff coming out of it is quite surprising. But at the same time, when you look back and you read and you think, remember the words and read the words of Malcolm X about celebrityism, you look back during that time frame. And you look back in the 60s and 70s, that was a powerhouse era because we had a lot of music going on that was very powerful, that was very popular. We had the British invasion, and much of the British invasion was stealing from black music anyway. That we that we went back. You had black film, were being 60s and 70s black films, and you had people like Sidney Poitier, all these individuals, and Malcolm X said, why aren't these people like Nina Simone? Very few people like Nina Simone, who, at the detriment of her celebrityism and her ability to make money, she was willing to write a song, Mississippi got right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think what this era is showing is that we don't have enough people who are willing to write and speak to and say Mississippi got to celebrityism and to all these things that are happening. I don't know. That was my takeaway from it, you know. And I agree with you. I hate to see us being antagonistic towards one
Hmm.
another in an open forum, but we live in America where we're not the only ones that are doing that in an effort to get to a very just society. So we see that even amongst white politicians. So you have people who are openly, I was watching, you know, where you have white politicians who are now openly criticizing other white politicians for their white supremacy and for their corporatism that has been a detriment. Now you move the needle. Now people are willing to say we have two states who have said Donald Trump will not be on the ballot. And now you have Republicans saying, Kevin McCarthy willing to say, for whatever reason, but he's willing to say that the Republican Party is not the party of America. He
Right.
said it himself, Democratic Party looks like the America we live in, where the Republican Party looks like what? A big old white boys country club. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's happening. The mask off era, and people are now for whatever reason, have the wherewithal as well as they feel they have the protection to speak to these things.
Okay.
And so I'd
So
entreat anyone to go and read that book called Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, a brother who was quite prolific during the 60s, who didn't live to be, I think, beyond the age of about 42, but he wrote a number of social political books that are still resonating today.
I'm definitely gonna check that out. So
Yes,
this is my
please.
question to you. Do you feel as though it's that easy to get healing just through counseling? Or are there other ways to be healed? I know there are other ways to be healed, but I'm just curious as far as your perspective is how do we heal black men?
Okay. I'll first start with myself. I feel like in the past 20 years, uh, in particular, the past 15 years, I've been kind of like started a healing process for myself. And the biggest thing for me, the key piece for me that has been a healing factor or a balm, as the old folks would say, on my scars, has been reincorporating the things as a child, literally as a child, that made me happy. Because I find with a lot of black men who are in their 40s and 50s, a lot of their unhappiness centers around, because I hear a lot of them say that once I got to a certain age, I was told I can no longer act this way. I had to act this way. I was given a set of code of what manhood looks like. There are no longer certain types of gestures I can do. There's no longer certain people I can go and play with. There are no longer certain words I can say. There are no longer certain activities I can do because right now I am a man or I'm on this pathway that somebody put me on for a manhood. And I have been in conversations with people who are ex-gang members, people who have been or from prison. And one brother who was on the key said that he said, my problems today are a direct result of listening to individuals who were themselves damaged and didn't know that, and them telling me that there's this narrow idea of masculinity. He was an ex-gamer.
Mhm.
He said, so that narrow masculinity, he said, kept me from very decent brothers who could have helped me. He said, I'm not just simply talking about brothers who are non-heterosexual. He said, I'm talking about brothers who were like geeks, brothers who were like very super smart, brothers who were just everyday average person living their lives. All those people, he said, were given a label of lame. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
These are just lame. And if you a street man, I'm not gonna use that word. You won't.
yeah.
You don't hang with these lanes. This is
Mhm.
not your lane. Your lane is over here. You need to be looking like and acting like 50 Cent. And if you ain't acting and looking like 50 Cent, manhood is not a part of a definition of who you are. Right?
Mhm.
That's what we were told, particularly by the time the late 90s into the early 2000s came. And I feel like
Okay.
for me, once I went back to myself, claimed things like the creativity in myself. I was always this kid who, for me personally, nothing wrong with riding bikes and nothing wrong with,
Mhm.
gallivanting as kids do, because I did that too. But I was this type of kid that those things were limited for me. I would limit myself because I was interested in the books and the worlds that were inside of books. I was interested. I had a microscope. I had a chemistry set. I had Legos. I had a race car track. I had a training set. I put together old school, airplanes, with the old school airplane glue that they don't like
Yeah.
you to have anymore. I did all of those things, but I was told to put those things away,
Mhm.
either indirectly by the examples of other people, or directly people telling you, you going to high school, you going, can't be doing those things now. This is what you need to be now. And so when I let go, and none of those things I didn't, some of those things I didn't let go of completely, but I did find myself when I look back on it, still accepting ideas about what manhood is and isn't
Mhm.
that weren't for me, and honestly weren't for black people, black men in general. And so when I let go of those things and start doing more of the things that people would look at you and like, you a grown man, why you sit up here learning digital art? Because I love digital art. When I was a kid, I used to draw and paint all the time. But again, it's something I put away. So when I redid that and started doing it a different way, and people say, well, how do you keep this kind of like positive, despite everything that's going on and the knowledge you have, how are you able to kind of have this kind of like positive outlook and look toward and see beauty in life despite everything around? I said, because I see beautiful things in many things that I do, despite the toxicity of the world, not just the black community, but of the world. So even though there's world out there, I still can find beauty in reading a book by Octavia Butler. Even though there's this war going on over in Gaza against the Palestinian people, I still can sit back and create a beautiful digital picture, or I still can write something, or I still can make something. The chain that you see me wearing now is something I wear because I got into beading. The earrings that I have are made by myself, and they're all cultural, and they all add, for me personally, all add to a certain level of healing. The other piece for me is, and there's nothing wrong with therapy, and I'm not saying I don't need therapy or wouldn't benefit from therapy, put it that way. But I found for me, the other part for me is also deep diving into my blackness, deep diving
Mhm.
into the culture of who I am as a black man, understanding even to the point of doing testing on my blood so that I know, where do I come from? Where does the majority of my DNA come? Who are my people?
Right.
Where on the continent? We all know we come from the continent, but where on the continent do I come from? That's very important and powerful information that some people poo-poo on. But what I found is more and more people, as they acquiesce that information, they access that information, and they assimilate that information about their blackness and where they come from inside of them. It's almost like watching a flower grow, and it's like they open and open, and then the petals get brighter and brighter and brighter. It's almost seems like that person, for me personally, when I'm around people like that, it's like they're exuding an energy that I want, I want a piece of, or that I want to be receptive to because I know that it's going to benefit me. Those are the two things. One, going back and doing some of those things that made me happy all my life that I know I let go of because of other people. And then two, for me, doing a deep dive into the culture of West Africa. That's the vast majority, even though many of them, like myself, because I have DNA that comes from the Maasai people in Kenya. And people say, well, how did that happen? Well, we all know how that happened. But the vast majority of my DNA is from West Africa. And so most of my culture is coming from, and so it's where I learned. I said, when I learned about jollof, I said, oh, jollof rice is the same thing as jambalaya and gumbo. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. So then I started understanding the connectedness, how we put the, even though we might not wear kente cloth over here, we proven like by culturally, like the colors, the way we put masks them
Hmm.
together. You know, when the 80s was around, the early 90s, the colors, you know, the
Yes.
designers were coming to the black community. Look like, what they doing with that? How did they put
Yeah.
those colors together? Ralph Lauren was known and Tommy Hilfiger knew. We put together colors in ways that they didn't think about. So when we started layering our shirts with color blue and pink and
Hmm.
blue and orange and all, they were like, what's with us?
Yeah.
And so now you start having you start seeing black culture and colors and how we put them together coming into the mainstream of designing because the more we do that, the more powerful we are, and the more I feel like we're more focused we are, and the more I think purposeful our existence is. And that's just one from I learned. And now, as far as therapy is concerned, if you feel you need therapy, therapy can be a start. Therapy can be everything that you need. It just honestly it depends on everybody's situation, you know. And I would never because I know there's a lot out there, and I know there are a lot of people actually scared of therapy because of uh, this country's ideas around people who need therapy. Even though in the white community it's a bit better and a bit more accepted, there's still, even when you see like television shows and everything, there's still a certain level of how can I say this? A certain level of people look down on people who are in need of mental health
Hmm.
care. And I think that's the reason why mental health care is not really accepted and really funded
Yeah.
the way it's supposed to be in this country.
I don't know. For me, my biggest thing is actually having an example.
Mhm.
So not just black males, but just in general. What is an example of a healed black man? So if that's not present, whether it's in the community, in your home, even celebrity wise or whatever entertainment, there has to be, in my opinion, some example of what a healed person looks like. And if that's not present, then to me it's just going to be a continuous cycle. Not to be negative, but I'm just
No,
looking
I
at it
think that's a valid.
realistically.
I think that's valid. If a person, that's with anything. I could be trying to be a surgeon, but if I don't have a good example of a surgeon before me,
Hmm.
when I try to do a surgeon, my surgery skills are going to be terrible because I haven't had a great example or anything like that. But I do think at a certain point in all of our lives, there's a certain thing called adulthood and accountability and responsibility that you
For
know where
sure.
you are and you know why you are where you are, and or that you should be working to understand it. So I don't have, particularly for men who are our age, I don't have a whole lot of room to give excuses for you not getting to where you need to be because you're not an idiot, you're not a child, and you're an individual who says he is able to parse things. So it would behoove you to start stepping back, being honest about where you are as an adult. It's not as adult because we both know some people grow up and they never become adults. They just become big
Hmm.
kids,
Big
and I
kid.
can't
Yep.
speak to those. I can't speak to those kids. Some of those people, honestly, that some of those individuals are part of that. Honestly, part of there's a certain segment. I'll put it this way: there's a certain segment, in my opinion, from what I've observed, what I've experienced, what I've observed, and what I've read about, there's a certain sector, I believe, of men, period, but particularly if we're talking about the black community, in the black community, who aren't going to change. And many of these things are being brought to light in conversations that are constantly happening in, so to speak, the manosphere. We've heard that term, the manosphere, where you constantly having people having regurgitated conversations in the manosphere around some of the same topics. And that for me shows that there's a certain sector, it's a small sector. It's just like anything that 80% of work is going to be done by 20% of the people. So there's a small sector, I believe, in the population. It could be 10%, 50, I don't know. But they're not changing. And you see that it's evident, like I said, when you see conversations where people are trying to open a positive doorway for black men to step through. You don't have to step through that, but there are multiple, so you step through to get to the source of your issues, to get help that you need, and so forth and so on.
Mhm.
And there's constantly this I can say backlash to you getting it done. And in some cases it's like this even direct, often direct deflection that a lot of the problems black men are because black women want to be too masculine. Black women are too masculine and want to do too much. And I'm like, well, that's just a cyclical conversation you're having there because you're pointing to the very problem that you're pointing to the very person that isn't the problem without and stepping over yourself in order to
Mhm.
get there. And so that's for me. I don't know. That's just for me. I just can't. I think that at a certain point, just like we want to have responsibility on other things, you are responsible for you getting to be a better man. I read and read up on since I am West African and more than likely probably Yoruba. I read up a lot on the Ifa, which is the
Mhm.
ancient spiritual system out of the Yoruba people who are from the night what we call Nigeria today, right?
Mhm.
And in the Ifa, there are two things that are paramount. One is you having outstanding character because you having outstanding character leads to you having that upper level spirituality that makes you a community sort of like guru. In other words, someone that is looked to for light in that community. Well, it starts by much of the discussion about the Orishas, much of the discussion about understanding life is about you getting your character together, having the most outstanding character, because there's no way in the world, as we always talk about from a metaphysical standpoint, your energy, you got to get your energy, you got to get the third eye open. And one brother told me, he said, if a person's third eye is open, that third eye is looking for the crown. That's the last piece, right? Is the
Right.
crown from an energy perspective. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So the work has to be you doing what needs to be done to internally undo the brokenness that you have. You know you have brokenness. You know, black folks say you're on
Mhm.
YouTube, you're on IG all the time. You see all this stuff, the stuff that you want to gloss over and scroll past. You need to stop and check in. And it's your ultimately it's every individual's responsibility, but also we need to be encouraging to each other and not looking down. So I don't look down on. I haven't been to therapy, but just because a black man has been in therapy doesn't mean that means he's any more broken than I am. He's any worse than I am. And there's nothing wrong with that therapy. I receive my therapy in a different way. That's all.
You said some really, really good things. Um,
Hmm.
so it's funny because you sound like me, and that's something I say all the time. Like self responsibility is big,
Hmm.
and especially for adults our age, um, men should be able to internalize, and see, okay, this is where I'm at, this is where I'm growing, or this is where I'm going, this is what I need to change.
Yes,
But
sir.
I'm more so speaking of the young black male. Like I have an 18-year-old son,
All right.
and unfortunately, my ex-wife and I got divorced, so it separated the home, and
Hmm.
so I wasn't able to be that example. And it's unfortunate, I grew up in a toxic family when I was growing up. My mom and dad was, toxic towards each other. So it took me until I got older. So I basically went through my adulthood as a black male, hurt and unhealed. And now that I'm older, I'm healing, and I believe I'm close to being fully healed. But being that I wasn't in the home at that time, he wasn't able to see that healed version of it. So for the young black males like him, that's why I feel as though it's important that we have to like present what is a healed black male, because
Sure, for
again,
sure.
my
And I think that,
opinion,
go
go
ahead. I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Yeah, my
Finish your
opinion
thought.
is we're being force fed as far as what a healed black male is supposed to look like. And just my opinion, I don't believe that they're actually something that's being shown. I know they're out there. Like yourself, you're one. You're doing the work, you're putting in the work. But because social media is so big, and if that young black male don't have that role model in the home, he's more or less going to look on the outside as far as what healing looks like as far as black men.
Give me an example is ultimately what you're saying, if I believe I hear you correctly. And I think that example comes from responsible men like you and me. Um, Brothers who are healed have to be challenged to heal other people. Brothers who are doing whatever it is they're doing in a positive light have to be willing to do that for other people. That's part of the piece that also needs to be discussed because sometimes we don't, we sometimes just say, well, I got to take care of my kids. Well, this is the problem with for me personally. This is the problem. That goes back to our being educated inappropriately by white supremacy about what family and community is. So historically, traditionally, our people believed in the village when the village is an extension of the extended family. So in the village, you have sometimes close cousins, extended cousins, so forth and so on. And so when there are problems in that community, and since most of that community is interconnected, what happens? What or did happen when I talk to other people, what I've read is that if something was happened, then men in that community come and talk to that individual and go stay with your cousin for a moment, go stay with your uncle for a moment. Let us figure this out and settle it down. And remember, the divorce was allowed. See, the divorce is a Christian thing and a white thing and what I mean by divorce I mean by this whole thing of monogamous relationship that can't be broken. That's
Right.
not something that is African. You
Hmm.
Africans have always had a way, from my region, all the way from South Africa to West, you've always had a traditional and a cultural way of removing yourself from a marriage situation that was no longer working right. And that was in the good, not only for you and the children, but also for the community as
Right.
a whole. So going back to that example, so now you calm down the community and village because you separate the people who are in conflict. I'm using the example of a family, husband and wife. Husband goes and stays with an older uncle or older cousin so they can resolve these things if they can. If not, then we put each other away. But you had that example of people in the community trying to do right. Men have to be, as part of your manhood, you have to be active in your community. So it's not enough it's okay that we have men and brothers who are getting coats and getting book bags and food, and that's fine. We also need men to show up and stand outside in the morning time when kids are going to school and when they come back. So they see that there are concerned black men in the community. They see us going and they see us coming. They also need to see black men on a regular basis concerned about children in the community, not just their own child. So that might be mean you showing up and being a part of a community organization that is trying to directly address issues with young black boys. Some of us who might have the capacity or getting in the age or our age, maybe you can leave the profession you're in and become a teacher so that now they can see you K through 5, K through 12, a black man who's concerned, who's educated, who's spiritual, and who's concerned about his community is there. So this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, people having a responsibility and understand that you have a responsibility not only for yourself, but also to heal the greater community where you can. And that's why I think that when there's no excuse for us, ultimately for us not having, for not only curing ourselves, and I'm not saying that it's not hard. I'm not saying that it not might be difficult for someone to get to that point where they can see these things. I'm not saying it at all. But at some point in your life, when you're addressing the things that are affecting you, we all have to stop and kind of do an evaluation of who we are internally, where we are right now, like what is it this life means to us, and what are we doing with our skills, and where are we going with these skills? And I think those things for me personally, when I answered those questions for myself, it led me to the pathway of one, when I wrote about the trauma that I experienced through poetry, it wasn't just mine because I started
Right.
getting other people who read the book and other people who had read, I've been to open mics before that because I've been writing for a while. People like that resonate with me. That's something I've been through as well. There's something I feel, something I think about, as well. So it's from my perspective of writing, it's my responsibility not only to be unafraid to write about the things that affect me directly and indirectly as a black man in this country and someone who's black and also non-heterosexual. What that means, and not to be afraid of that. I don't have to walk around with bells and whistles and a flag and all that kind of stuff. For me, you know who I am. You know what I'm about when you're actually working with me. And so, if you say you're this decent person who's concerned about justice for everyone, I don't have to. I don't have to. I don't have to get into all these conversations about this, that, and the third, or whatever. You'll see me and you'll see come out. And if you are as decent as you say you are, because for me, I don't have to know all of your isms, or I don't have to know all of your intersections. I don't have to know all of your categories in order to treat you decent. And I think that's where we have to get. I don't have to know what you're in, all those things. I see you as a man, and particularly as a black man. I know you have things. So the decent side of me, my Iwa Rere, my outstanding character, is going to say, why would I want to treat him badly anyway? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, in other words, it doesn't resonate with logic
Right.
to do it.
Okay. So I have two things for you.
All
Okay.
right.
So the first one, if you can build an objective, um, healed black male, what would that be? And then the second part of that is okay. Let me let you go ahead and start on that one first.
So if I could build a black man myself,
Yeah. Yeah. If you could build an objective, someone that can actually say, okay, that is the healed black male. Because in my opinion, healed sometimes is subjective.
yeah,
Because
for sure,
you're
for sure,
right.
for sure.
So
I would say an example would be for me, an example of a healed black man or a black man look for healing. I know a lot of people might see this controversial, but I look at LeBron James. I look at
mm,
LeBron James and the history of where he comes from and the community in which he comes from and the toxicity around him, even when he was a young kid and his mom used some of the money to buy him a decent car because just like he's going around all the other people with decent cars, my son is going to have a decent car too. I didn't have any problem with that. But one thing I saw about him as he became prolific in this game, he didn't simply think for himself. When I look at the career and the things that, say, for instance, counterpart of his, Michael Jordan, I see very starkly different types of
different.
men,
Yes. Yep.
starkly different types of men. So for whatever reason, from my perspective and from my spiritual energy, I look at LeBron James. Not only did he do well in his craft and doing the best he can, but he took what he could do with his craft and did for other people. And to me, that is black, that is African, that is tradition. Because throughout Africa, particularly from the east side to the west, two terms resonate even though they're different languages, and that is Uhuru and Ubuntu. Now, Uhuru means that we're going to all work together to get this thing solved. Whereas Ubuntu says, if I have, you have, which means I'm going to share with you. And that's the two things for me, I feel, are philosophies that are resonate in every spiritual system in Africa. First thing I need to make sure if I'm eating, I'm not going to let my brother go hungry. So this is why when Socrates traveled the African world, in a book called Critias and Timaeus. He documents his travels. And he talks about how when he traveled, what we called then at that time Africa, what we called it Akelbalan, he said, I didn't go anywhere where there was abject poverty. He said, everywhere I went, black folks, he said, the Ethiops, which black skins, he said, the Ethiops were educated and he said, there was no abject poverty. He said, yes, there were differentiations in the level of wealth that people had. He said, but there was no one begging on the street like I see back in Greece or Rome. And so for me, if you're saying you're black, if you're saying you're African, you're conscientious, for me personally, those two terms should be at the foundation and the core of who you are and how you operate with Africa. And I think eventually and that if that's at the core of who you are, then it's at the core of how you operate with any and everybody. And that, for me personally, that's where so I have to see a man who's not only being prolific with himself, but also being prolific in helping other people get there. For me to look at him and being like, wow, he's really doing it. He's really concerned. He's for me personally, I know he's not perfect. I'm not looking for a perfect grade because I know I'm a grown man. I know that that doesn't exist. But I know there are great examples. And for me personally, I would be pointing black youth to LeBron James because he's prolific in his craft. He doesn't let anybody talk down to him. And then he created opportunities for youth and for those youth parents because he created jobs for the parents of the youth. He was creating opportunities to go to school. That's like full circle. I don't know if you can, who you can ask for more from that,
Right.
for something like that. Being unapologetic about who they
Mhm.
are and what they'll do for their people.
Okay. I can definitely see that. That's a real good example. Um.
What would
So
be an example from your perspective?
that's a tricky one because just like you said, like no one is perfect.
Correct.
So I tend not to look at celebrities or entertainers or athletes
Oh, for
because
sure.
I
No, no,
feel as
no.
though that's
I just used him because that was an example of a person I think everyone, there are people in my
right.
life
But
that I
no,
could talk
yeah,
about, but no one, they don't know them. So that's
right.
why I use LeBron James as an example because he exemplified some of the men, like there's a brother by the name of Lewis Cross, who used to be, he was an educator in my community. And he's one of those individuals I look up to who was he's a married black man himself with children
Mhm.
who took interest in the children of a black woman in his community who was a single parent. And so he made sure that we weren't, that when he, because he was an educator himself, whatever he came intersected with about improving the education line, he shared it with my mom. So I have a brother who, because of him, got the chance to go to high school at Phillips Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, which is one of the most prestigious college high schools in the world, right? If you're not familiar with Phillips Exeter Academy. So he went there. The scholarships that I got, a lot of the additional kind of ancillary activities I had, going to things like the circus, going to the ice capades, going to see the symphony perform. He made sure that we intersected with those things to make us well-rounded people and understand society in which we live in and those kind of things. So yeah, he's an example as well, but I chose LeBron because he's an example I think that will resonate with a larger group of people watching.
That makes perfect sense. Um, but for me, this may sound not crazy, but just a little off color. But for me personally, I feel as though someone should kind of create that person. And what I mean by that is, I believe in ascension. Like right now, I'm on a journey of ascension. I'm growing. So I do my best not to focus on what everybody else is doing, but more so what I'm doing. So I look back at my life as far as I'm a young adult up until right now. So I look at the mistakes and stuff that I made. I continue to educate myself. I continue to, put myself into spirituality and grow that way. So I look at my past mistakes and I focus on who it is that I want to be. And then I say, okay, I heal that way. So I do shadow work is the big thing everybody talks about, but I actually write down. I have a journal, and I go back and I look at, okay, that's who I was then, but that's not who I am now. And if I find myself still doing some of the things that I did in the past, and I say, wow, that's like a slap in the, that's the wake up call. I need to change. I need to be, more
That
in
was your
tune with
epiphany. Hmm.
exactly. So
Hmm.
I feel as though I'm healing that way because okay, I'm no longer triggered by the things that used to trigger me before. And the way I interact with people, I definitely can see a change. So I feel
Yes.
as though if more people focus on that opposed to having an example of what someone is healed, I think sometimes that can cause somebody to go in the wrong direction because their walk is not necessarily your walk. Now, as black
Right.
men, yes, we all experience, racism, being treated a certain type of way. That's something we can all, experience as one as a group of people, but still we all have individual traumas that we experienced in life that we still have to heal from. So I think if
I
we
think
heal from those first, then we can actually heal from the trauma as far as just being a black male, if that makes sense.
two things for me, right? One, I think the difference is, one, you and I might be not the average man, and what I mean by that, in that we have the wherewithal at a certain point in life, even though at a certain point in our life when we are making mistakes with our personhood and trying and not the best that we can be, we were able to see that. Not everybody's there. And remember, I think you were saying that the example is for the youth. And so the youth need to have a physical example. They
Right.
can't, because they're so young, they can't parse all the time, all these other mental things and spiritual things. You and I have the blessing, and when I say blessing, I'm not a religious person. I mean truly as a gift. We have
Right.
this gift of being able to look back. You know what I'm saying? Behind it and
Hmm.
our personal experiences to see we are, and whatever for whatever reason, you and I have a current level of, or at the time we start doing our work on ourselves, we had a certain level of mental capacity that we could see ourselves. Some people can't, and some people may never be. And I think that's that percentage of people who might be lost because they refuse to see it, even when you
Hmm.
show them examples. So LeBron James is there, but LeBron James, a lot of times, I see all the time from people who could benefit from him as an example, poo-poo on him because he's not Michael Jordan. And so
Right.
Michael Jordan was a in comparison, a very toxic person. You know what I'm saying? Very toxic
Yeah.
person, gambler, all of the things.
Hmm.
I'm not saying necessarily they're evil or sinful, but
Right.
he was doing things, in my opinion, that are in detriment to the
Hmm.
overall character of a person long term, right?
Hmm.
So you don't have those with LeBron. Why isn't LeBron elevated? because there's certain mentality amongst some people where they look at some of those toxic things as being still part of manhood. So
Yeah.
part of your man, if you and I were out and you and I were having a positive conversation and we were being cordial with each other and we were being non-combative and we weren't
Hmm.
punching down each other as we talked to each other, and especially when we cracking on each other, and now we weren't saying
Hmm.
things that were like, oh, look at that
Yeah.
dude. Well, we're not doing that. We're weirdos.
Hmm. Exactly.
And I know you've experienced that. I
Hmm.
can only from your energy and from what you're talking about, what you've been trying to, I know you felt that way.
Hmm.
So that's why I say for there's one, I think you do need an example. Two, I think some men will see what their needs are and they will either understand what it is for whatever reason on their own, what it is they need to adjust and move around or remove. And some men will need that therapy. They will need someone to help them through it for whatever reason. It's just what it is. And so my thing is get what you need, how you need it. If you are that brother who can understand and figure out, do it. If you're that brother who needs this, do it. If you're that brother who needs that therapy, get it so that you can be that better person and you can add to the community in which you want to because we all want to add positively to the community that we want to be a part of. Otherwise, for me, ultimately, what's the point of creating a legacy?
Exactly.
Even if that legacy is just your child, what are you just going to
Hmm.
create a clone of yourself that continues to dump in the most
Hmm.
toxic things into the community? This is why, again, this takes other people doing their own research. This is in my research. I found that even in communities on the continent that have been anti-gay, the community has not been toxic historically towards those gay men and women in those community. In many cases, historically, if they are people who are contributing to the society, this is pre-colonialism. Those people, despite the fact that they were not heterosexual, will be asked to create children so that you're adding that DNA, that spiritual energy back in community because we don't want to lose that.
Right.
We don't want to lose that. You know what I'm saying? And I know these are things that people may not be ready to think about, but this is where you need to start thinking. A person is valued by the most by the in the ether by what they bring to the table with respect to how they're going to help the community be stable and grow in a positive way. I'm not just thinking about the grow by numbers, but
Right.
grow by access to what it is that the community needs access to.
Hmm.
You know,
So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That however you say it, I can't even think of.
the hammer on the
But
nail. Yeah,
yeah, there you go.
yes sir, yes sir. I'm just trying to be the best I can be. I don't know if anybody's gonna ever see me as an example, and I don't necessarily my motivation for being a better me
Right.
and being 100% me all the time is it's not about necessarily clout and being seen and like pick me.
Hmm.
It's really just about. I feel like when ultimately I feel like when you're doing the work that you need to do, people are going to see you because,
Right.
like I said, you become almost this weirdo existence.
Hmm.
You become this light and this energy that people are like,
Hmm.
you're not like everybody else, and but you look like everybody else,
Hmm.
and you've been through with everybody else, but you're not like and acting like everybody else. Why is that? And then you can start having that conversation. And I think that
That's
happens more and more as brothers begin to work on themselves.
mhm. Now this is the flip side of it.
Okay.
I know we live in a world that's duality as far as it's good and bad, but more so here in the United States, in my opinion, the focus it thrives on negative energy. So even if a healed man is being shown, that's not going to be the most popular thing. And I hate to say it, but society won't, in my opinion, will thrive off of it because it thrives off of an unhealed person. If you sit back and really look at it, the United States really thrives off of unhealed people.
hmm
So
hmm
if you
I'm in that
had that,
situation you're talking about with Cat
yeah,
Williams and what
yeah,
he's exposing. All of that shows all of that shows the brokenness in this country that's a long time. If you, I entreat you and anyone else listening to the podcast, go and look up the conversation or the interview between Larry King and Shirley Temple back in 1989. It's eye opening. And to me, the bigger part of this, what's eye opening about the interview is the fact that neither one of them in that conversation shows any anger. They don't show any angst. They don't show any disgust for how Shirley Temple was treated. Because in that interview, she talks about how when one of her contracts ended and she showed up at Warner Brothers to get a new contract. I think it was Warner Brothers, it might have been Metro. But in the conversation anyway, she said Shirley Temple says that the vice president of the company was naked the whole time he was interviewing her and asking her to come on as a new property for that company. And the same thing she said she learned from other was happening, that her mom was being sexually propositioned in another room. And so for me personally, this type of energy is long standing in this country, and it's not going anywhere. We have the intersection, the Epstein, Weinstein, all of this, Sean Combs, all of this stuff is showing up. And a lot of it, I believe, is showing up now because I think that it is a snapback in that type of energy. And I think people actually want truth. People are used to Black folks being about truth. This country wouldn't be what it is without Black folks speaking truth to power since the death of Crispus Attucks. And so I just think that we need to get healed. We need to think deeply and layered about what that means for you as an individual. And then we need to be necessary with being, you don't have to seek out people to be an example too, but you need to be open and willing to share, your healing with somebody else.
So I'm gonna ask this last question in closing because it was
Okay.
the premise of the question and the topic for tonight is why do Black men need to heal? I know we talked about kind of sorta, but we didn't actually like wrap it up and say, okay, this is the reason why. What's the significance of a healed Black man?
I think when the Black man is healed, then the Black community will be whole and it will be able to accomplish all the things that it's trying to accomplish. It requires both the Black man and the Black woman to be healed. The orientation doesn't matter. It's about us being balanced and being able to work with each other, being able to talk with each other, and being able to see each other and doing the things in our community that need to be done without any apology, without any interruption, without feeling as if we are being micromanaged by white institutions in this country. So I feel like when you are healed, you can see things more clearly. You are, I think, healthier mentally and physically because you have healed that trauma or whatever those issues are that have occurred that has caused you to be in this position that you have. And so when I look at that, I look at what that healing looks like. So you have you have this powerful, like I was talking about earlier. Now you have Black men and Black women who are, so to speak, on the track together, running
Mhm.
the same race together, running in the same direction together. Whether it's a relay or whether they know how to hand off to each other to get stuff done, or whether it's a whole race and we all running together. I'm looking to the left, I'm looking to the right, and I see all the good people I need to win this thing. And that's why I feel Black men, that's why you need to be helped, because you're never going to be able to do and be the prolific person that you want. All these things that you're trying to do. For me, the reason why we fail so bad is because we have some of these pecking orders within our community still.
Mhm.
And again, when I look at why, and when I look at the life of, say, Fred Hampton, everyone talks about being Fred Hampton or being this prolific Black man who's as powerful as Fred Hampton. But when you look at the real life of Fred Hampton, he does things, unfortunately, a lot of Black men in our community don't want to do because they've been infected by white supremacy that says certain things about certain groups. And what I mean by that is this: when you read the FBI file that is available on Fred Hampton, uh, the, the the Black man who ran the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover at the time, who was also a gay Black man, or mulatto, who was hunting the FBI at the time, he wrote in that man's final file, "He's the most dangerous Black man in the country." And the reason why was this: Fred Hampton was willing to work with, as Malcolm X said. Remember, Fred Hampton was killed before Malcolm X, but Malcolm X said too, before he died in 64, murdered in 65, "I'm now willing to work with anyone who's willing to fight." Fred Hampton was living that in his activity. So he was in contact with the Yellow Panthers. You know who they are. He was in contact with the Brown Berets. He was in contact with the radical factions of the anti-war movement, which is the white boys, and he was in contact with blacks and whites in the gay movement of that time. So if you remember, if you've ever done any reading, many of those in that radical side of that started Stonewall, many of them were feared by the police in New York because there are documentaries as well as paperwork that shows that the police hated to go in New York and deal with that community because they said they knew they were going to have to fight them, physically fight them. So, so Fred Hampton knew one thing for sure, and it's what Malcolm X learned together, that there is no real progress unless we work together. So even within the Black community, we have to be willing to work together around all of the different groups within our community in order to move forward.
Mhm.
And this is the very reason why Malcolm X was a close friend to who? James Baldwin, who we call Jimmy Baldwin. And Martin Luther King was close friends with who? Bayard Rustin, the man they came, who was the architect for the 1963 March on Washington, who said there's no other person who can do this but Bayard Rustin, a black man who just happens to be born gay. So we have to get over ourselves. And I think that's another thing, black men, you need to get over yourself, particularly quickly and like yesterday of this issue of non heterosexuality versus non-hetero, uh, and it meaning something. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And the more you put yourself against that, the to me, the less you're going to be doing positive for the community. It's been shown. It's been shown.
That's good stuff. I love it.
Thank
Hour
you.
went by
Appreciate
entirely too fast.
it.
We could talk for 2, 3 more hours, but
I know,
I,
and this is the conversations we need to be having with, so to speak, everyday black men.
everybody.
And I
Yep,
know there are
exactly.
podcasts out there for brothers to join in, but you need to also start talking to each other. That's another problem that we have sometimes, particularly in spaces, since a lot of us moved into non-urban spaces. A lot of us don't see each other when we're not in quote unquote the urban or hood or
That's true.
whatever it is in your mind. We need to start seeing each other and start speaking to each other from a camaraderie perspective. In other words, I see you because I recognize that we all share some of the same issues in this country. And I can at least wave to you and say, have a good day, brother or
Exactly.
sister. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir. All right. Well, Mr.
I
Taylor, I
appreciate you.
enjoyed it.
I
Hopefully, we can
enjoyed
stay
talking
in
to you, man.
contact. Same here.
Most definitely. And I hope it's beneficial for anyone out there. Again, you can reach me on IG. Just look for my book and look for me, Ola Orun underscore King on IG. My books, my scars are my birthmark, as well as Black Music Politics and Word Bomb are both on Amazon and on Barnes and Nobles online. And I appreciate you having me on the show and wish you all the success.
Same here. You be easy. Enjoy your week, sir. Thank
All
you.
right, take care now. You all,
All
everyone,
right.
take care.
All right. Bye bye.
You want to